The security camera at the Morrison Fuel and Go on Southeast Burnside captured everything. 11 minutes and 43 seconds of footage. The timestamp read 11:04 p.m. on a Tuesday in October. Portland was wet, the way Portland is almost always wet in October. Not raining hard, just misting, that quiet Pacific Northwest mist that settles into everything and makes the streetlights blur into soft orange halos. The parking lot was mostly empty. One truck at the pump. One man walking towards the door with his hands in his pockets. That man was 6'3", wearing a faded gray hoodie and dark jeans and boots that had seen better years. He walked the way surfers walk, loose through the shoulders, unhurried, like the ground was something to move with rather than against. Nobody looked twice at him. What happened next is why 11 million people watched that footage inside 48 hours. But we'll get to that. First, you need to understand the kind of day that led Chris Hemsworth to that parking lot, and why, of all the people who walked past Raymond Briggs that night, he was the one who stopped. Chris had flown in on the first-class cabin out of Sydney with a connection through LAX, landed at Portland International just after noon, and checked into a private suite at the 5-star Harwick Park Hotel on the park blocks. He'd been invited by Pac North Wellness Group, a regional fitness and nutrition company exploring a potential investment partnership. 3 days of meetings, low profile. His manager, Diane Marsh, had handled the booking under a name they used for quiet travel, and he'd gotten through the airport the way he usually did when he dressed like someone who works for a living. Hoodie, jeans, boots, baseball cap, small carry-on. Nobody stopped him. The trouble started in the Harwick Park lobby. He'd walked up to the front desk to ask about the gym hours. The concierge, a young man in his late 20s, pressed white shirt, gold name pin reading Derek, looked at him the way certain people look at someone who has wandered into the wrong section of a store. The look lasted less than a second, but it landed. "Can I help you?" Derek said. His tone was the specific shade of polite that is not polite at all. "Just wondering what time the fitness center opens in the morning." Derek glanced at the gym schedule card without picking it up. 6 a.m. for hotel guests. A pause that was one beat too long. "Are you a hotel guest?" "I am, yeah. And the room number would be?" Chris gave it. Derek typed something into the computer, looked at the screen, and his expression shifted. Not dramatically, just a small recalibration. The kind that happens when the number turns out to be a suite on the 14th floor rather than a standard double. "Of course. The fitness center opens at 6. I'll have a schedule sent to your room." His voice had changed. It was warmer now. Professionally warmer, which is a different thing from warm. Chris said thank you and walked to the elevator. He thought about it going up, not with anger, with a kind of tired recognition. The look, the pause, the question about the room number. He'd seen that sequence before, in variations, more times than he could count. It was the particular transaction of being assessed before being helped, which was the opposite of help. He understood why Derek had done it. He didn't think Derek was a bad person. He thought Derek had learned a system, and the system was wrong, and nobody had told him yet. He pushed it aside. He had meetings in the morning. The Pac North Wellness Group offices were on the 15th floor of a building in the Pearl District. Clean, modern, views of the West Hills through floor-to-ceiling glass. Chris sat through Tuesday's 4 hours of presentations in his small leather notebook, asking the right questions, and then came back Wednesday morning for another round. The meetings were good. The product was real. He was genuinely interested. Wednesday evening, he had no obligations. He ate alone at a quiet restaurant on Mississippi Avenue, tipped well, and walked back toward the hotel. He didn't like taking cars for short distances. He liked the feeling of a city through the soles of his feet. He cut through the Morrison Fuel and Go parking lot on Southeast Burnside because it was on his route and he'd seen a sign for the restroom. That's when he heard it. Not a shout, not a crash. Just a sound, the particular compressed sound of a large body losing its argument with gravity. He came around the corner of the building and saw a man on the ground. Now, before we go any further, you need to know about Raymond Briggs. Raymond was 58 years old. He'd worked construction for 31 years. Concrete, framing, roofing, the kind of work that pays decent while your body can take it, and then the day comes when it can't anymore, and you find out there was never a plan for what came after. His right knee had been rebuilt twice. His lower back had a story that 2 different orthopedic surgeons had tried and failed to finish. He'd been laid off from Hargrove Construction 14 months ago when the foreman brought in a younger crew at lower rates, and since then, he'd been doing odd jobs, odd hours, whatever came through. That Tuesday night, he'd been scheduled for the late shift at Whitmore's Kitchen on Burnside. 11 to close, kitchen cleanup, $42 after taxes. Not glamorous work. Not optional either. He'd taken the number 14 bus from his apartment on Northeast Prescott and walked the last 6 blocks in the mist. He was there. He had clocked in. And then the shift manager, a man named Marcus Holt, had met him at the kitchen entrance. Marcus had a clipboard and the expression of a man solving a small administrative problem. "Briggs, you're not on the schedule tonight. Check your app. I have the confirmation text right here." Raymond pulled out his phone. Marcus didn't look at it. "System updated this afternoon. We're overstaffed for the close." He clicked his pen twice. "You'll get an hour for coming in." Raymond stood in the back corridor of Whitmore's Kitchen and listened to the sound of a full crew working on the other side of the double doors. Pans, the exhaust fan, 3 voices he recognized. He did not say what he was thinking. He had learned, over 7 months, that saying what he was thinking cost more than it returned. He got his hour logged. He walked outside. He started the 2.4 miles home. He made it as far as the Morrison Fuel and Go. The pain hit him at the edge of the parking lot. Not the knee pain he knew. Something new, starting high in his chest and spreading through both shoulders at once. And he recognized it the way you recognize something you've been warned about your entire adult life and always assumed would never happen to you. He grabbed the brick wall at the corner of the building. His breath went wrong. The wet asphalt came up faster than he intended. He was on the ground when Chris came around the corner. Chris stopped. Not paused. Stopped. Mid-stride, the particular stillness of someone who has immediately understood what they're seeing. He crossed the distance in 3 steps and dropped to one knee. Raymond looked up. Through the pain, through the mist, he registered the face. Big man. Younger, an accent he couldn't quite place, something warm and southern hemisphere in it, and eyes that were, and this was the word Raymond used every time he told the story afterward, calm. Not performing calm. Just calm, the kind that comes from somewhere earned. "Can you tell me where the pain is?" the man said. Raymond pressed his fist to the center of his chest. The man nodded once. He pressed 2 fingers to Raymond's wrist, not fumbling for a pulse the way most people do, thumb first in the wrong location, but immediately, precisely, 2 fingers on the radial pulse point below the thumb. He held them there for 4 seconds. Then he placed his palm flat on Raymond's sternum and held it there without pressing, just resting, the particular gesture of someone listening through their hand. He checked Raymond's fingernails. He checked his lips. His eyes moved fast and purposefully, the way someone looks when they're confirming a checklist they've run before. "Stay flat," he said. "Don't try to sit up." He stood and walked quickly to the gas station door. He came back 40 seconds later with a bottle of water and the attendant behind him. Danny Kowalski, 26, who had worked the Morrison night shift for 8 months and had never in those 8 months seen anything like this. "Can you chew these? Don't swallow whole, chew them. 2 aspirin in his palm." Raymond got them down. The water helped. "Ambulance is coming," Danny said. His voice had a shake in it. Chris stayed exactly where he was. He didn't check his phone. He didn't look toward the street. He pulled off his hoodie. Underneath was a plain white t-shirt, and the November cold didn't seem to register on him the way it would on most people. And he folded it carefully and placed it under Raymond's head. Then he sat down on the wet asphalt, back against the brick wall, and rested one hand on Raymond's shoulder. Not patting it, not a gesture, just his hand there, resting. "You got a name?" he said. "Raymond." "I'm Chris." Something passed between them that did not require anything more than those 4 words. The ambulance arrived at 11:16 p.m. The paramedics moved fast. One of them looked at the positioning, the aspirin, the water. "You did good." That bought him time. Chris stood. He retrieved his hoodie from under Raymond's head, gently, waiting for the transfer to the stretcher. He answered the paramedics' questions with the precise, unhurried accuracy of someone trained to observe and report. Then he stepped back and let them work. Raymond reached for his arm as they loaded him. Chris leaned down. "Thank you," Raymond said. "Good that I was here," Chris said. "That was all." Danny Kowalski watched him walk back inside. His hands were shaking. The man bought a bottle of water and a granola bar, left a 20 on the counter, said keep the change, and walked out into the mist. Danny stood behind the counter for a long moment. Then he went to the back office and pulled up the security footage. He watched the 11 minutes and 42 seconds twice. Then he pulled out his phone and posted a 12-second clip, the part where the man dropped to one knee and checked the pulse without hesitation. Then laid his hoodie under a stranger's head and sat down beside him in the rain. He captioned it, "Some guy saved a man's life in our parking lot tonight and then just bought a water and left. Doesn't even know I have this." He posted it at 11:47 p.m. By 3 a.m. it had 400,000 views. By morning, someone had found the face. Chris didn't know about the video until Diane called at 7:15 Thursday morning. She had a gift for delivering alarming news in a tone that was informative rather than theatrical. "You're on the internet. In what context? The good kind. Footage of you helping a man who collapsed. It's everywhere." A brief pause. "I have 14 interview requests already." "No," Chris said. "I know, it wasn't a story. I just didn't want him to be alone on the pavement." "I know," Diane said. "That's exactly why it's a story." He declined all of it. No statement, no comment, nothing confirmed. He went to his Thursday meetings at Pac North, 15th floor, views of the West Hills, another 4 hours of productive conversation, and came back to the hotel that evening, thinking the whole thing would pass in 48 hours, the way these things usually do. He was wrong about that. And here's the part that didn't make the news. Because Chris had gone back to the hotel that Thursday evening genuinely believing it was done. The video would fade. People would move on. Raymond was recovering. He'd confirmed that through Diane. The story had a clean ending. He ordered room service. He looked out the floor-to-soiling windows at the Portland skyline, at the lights coming on across the West Hills in the early dark. He felt the particular quiet of having done something right, without anyone making a large story out of it. He was satisfied. He was ready to fly home Sunday. He was wrong about all of it. On Friday morning, a journalist named Sarah Waverly from the Portland Independent called Diane's office. She wasn't calling about the video. She'd been doing a business profile on Gerald Whitmore, owner of Whitmore's Kitchen, 4 locations across Portland, when she started hearing things from multiple sources. Scheduling irregularities, contract workers booked and canceled without pay, a shift manager who treated hourly workers as a line item to be optimized. She'd been sitting on it for weeks, waiting for someone willing to go on record. The video gave her the thread, not because of who was in the footage, but because of the man on the ground. By Tuesday afternoon, she'd identified Raymond Briggs, 31 years in construction, 14 months unemployed. Sent home from a Whitmore shift on the same night he had a cardiac episode in a gas station parking lot. She called Raymond Thursday evening. He answered on the 3rd ring. She called Tina Reeves on Friday morning. Tina Reeves was 29, 2 years in the Whitmore's Burnside Prep Kitchen, arriving early, leaving late, saying nothing she didn't have to say, because she had a 7-year-old at home and a lease that cost $1,847 a month. She was the first person to map the pattern. Names cycling off the roster, hours disappearing, the particular look on Marcus Holt's face when he came back from reviewing the numbers with Gerald Whitmore. She had never said a word. She had been making the precise daily calculation that millions of people in her position make. The risk of speaking is larger than the cost of silence. But Tina had been in the back breaking down cardboard the night Raymond was sent away. She'd heard Marcus on the phone to Gerald, his voice doing the performance it saved for the owner, tight, efficient, already filing the interaction as solved. She'd heard him say, "Briggs was a no-show tonight. Again." Raymond had clocked in. She'd watched Marcus send him home. She went home that night. She sat on her couch and didn't sleep. She told herself to wait and see. She'd been telling herself that for 2 years. When Sarah Waverly called on Friday, Tina was quiet for a long moment. Then she said, "He was on the pavement. Someone sat with him when he didn't have to." And I thought, the least I can do is speak. Sarah called Gordon Price that same afternoon, 51 years old, 4 months at Whitmore's Burnside before Marcus found a procedural reason to remove him in March. Gordon had gone on record once before, a detailed email to Whitmore's corporate address, specific dates and amounts, a response from Gerald's executive assistant that said, "Thank you, we take all concerns seriously," followed by nothing. He picked up on the first ring. He had been waiting for someone else to open the door. But here's what nobody knew yet. Not Sarah, not Tina, not Gordon, was that Gerald Whitmore had been watching the video. Gerald was 61, heavyset, a man who had built 4 restaurant locations and a commercial real estate portfolio worth an estimated $11 million by trusting his managers to handle operational details without asking granular questions. He'd watched the clip on Thursday evening, read the comments, and done the calculation quickly. The man in the video was famous, the man on the ground had worked for him, and the optics were going to be complicated. By Friday morning, he'd called his attorney. His attorney advised him to get ahead of it. Gerald agreed. Gerald Whitmore issued a statement Friday afternoon before Sarah Waverly's article had even published. He expressed, in 2 careful paragraphs, his deep admiration for the act of kindness captured in the footage, his gratitude that Raymond Briggs had received help in time, and his personal commitment to the well-being of every member of the Whitmore's kitchen family. When Chris saw the statement forwarded by Diane, he read it once. He didn't say anything. He set down his phone and looked out the floor-to-ceiling windows of his private suite at the gray-pink Portland skyline. Diane called 10 minutes later. "Gerald Whitmore's PR team is reaching out. They'd like to set up a photo with you and Raymond Briggs at one of the Whitmore's locations. Goodwill gesture. They're pitching it as..." "No," Chris said. "I told them you'd say that. He's using Raymond. He's using the video." "Yes," Diane said, "he is." Chris was quiet for a moment. "Find out if Sarah Waverly got her story yet." There was a pause on the line. "You know her?" "I know what she's working on." "Diane? Find out." That was the moment everything changed direction. Not dramatically, just a small pivot. A quiet decision made in a hotel room on a Friday afternoon that sent the next 2 weeks somewhere Gerald Whitmore had not anticipated. The Portland Independent published Sarah Waverly's story on Saturday morning. The headline, "Behind the viral video, the restaurant chain that sent a heart attack patient home early. 3 workers named and on record. Pay stubs. Scheduling logs." A text message chain in which Marcus Holt confirmed Raymond's shift, then 2 hours later told Gerald Whitmore it had been a no-show. The story was thorough. It was specific. It cited 11 documented instances across 7 months involving Raymond Briggs alone. It quoted Tina Reeves directly. It quoted Gordon Price. And in the final paragraph, it noted that Gerald Whitmore's Friday statement, his warm expression of care for the Whitmore's kitchen family, had been issued approximately 18 hours after Gerald's attorney was retained, and approximately 14 hours before the publication of this article. By noon, the piece had been picked up by the Seattle Times. By 3 o'clock, employment attorney David Calloway of Calloway and Marsh Legal Group had issued a statement that his firm was preparing a class action filing on behalf of 14 current and former Whitmore's kitchen employees. Gerald Whitmore released a second statement at 4:15. 2 paragraphs. Internal review underway. Marcus Holt placed on administrative leave. The comments section on his restaurant's social media pages was not a place Gerald would have wanted to read. But here's the part that made it worse for Gerald, and better for everyone else. Sarah Waverly had also spoken to Danny Kowalski, not about the video, about the morning after. About what Danny had found when he arrived for his shift on Wednesday and read the Portland Independent article printed out and taped to the break room wall by his manager. Danny had stood at the counter with his coffee and read the part about Raymond being sent home early. The cancellation out logged as a no-show. Marcus on the phone to Gerald while Raymond was still in the building. He set his coffee down carefully, the way you set something down when your hands have gone slightly unreliable. He called Sarah Waverly that afternoon. He told her about the 11 minutes and 43 seconds. He told her the detail that had stayed with him since the night it happened. "Most people stop for 30 seconds, Danny said. And then they look at their phone. And then they start thinking about leaving." He sat down, like he'd already decided he wasn't going anywhere. Sarah put it in the follow-up piece she ran the following Wednesday. That quote got more engagement than any other single line in either article. People shared it without context. A middle school teacher in Boise had her class write essays about a time they had stayed when they could have left. The essays were, by her account, the best ones she'd read in 11 years of teaching. But before any of that, before the termination letter, before the settlement, before Gerald's attorneys got involved, there was a Monday morning at the Whitmore's kitchen on Burnside that nobody reported on, and that mattered more than anything that came afterward. Marcus Holt arrived at 7:45, a full hour before his shift. He'd received a call from Gerald's attorney the previous Friday till that night telling him that his status was under review, that he should come in Monday and speak with the regional HR director. He walked in through the back and found the kitchen already staffed for morning prep. 7 people he'd managed for months, all aware, because the Saturday article had been forwarded to every group chat, every thread, every phone in that building by Saturday afternoon. The kitchen went quiet when Marcus walked in, not dramatically. The kind of quiet that is simply the absence of the sounds that would normally have been there. The easy talk, the radio, the back and forth between the prep crew. In its place was the sound of knives on cutting boards and pans on the range, and no one meeting his eyes. He stood just inside the kitchen door for a moment. He had managed this kitchen for 3 years. He knew the layout better than he knew the layout of his own apartment. He'd hired 4 of the 7 people currently in the room, signed off on their schedules, approved their hours, decided, more times than he had counted, which of them stayed, and which of them got a text saying the shift had been reassigned. Beverly, the late shift lead, the same Beverly who'd been covering the night Raymond was sent away, was at the coffee station. She looked up when Marcus walked in. She did not look away. She just looked at him, the way someone looks when they have something to say and have decided the saying of it can happen without words. Marcus looked back at her. He looked at the prep crew. He looked at the schedule board on the wall. He walked to the HR director's office and closed the door. Marcus Holt was formally terminated Monday at 9:90 a.m., effective immediately, under Section 8, 4 of the Whitmore's Kitchen Employee Conduct Policy. Falsification of scheduling records, misrepresentation of employee attendance. The termination letter cited 11 specific incidents across 7 months. Raymond Briggs's name appeared in 4 of them. Marcus sat across from a local news camera that afternoon. His jaw was tight. His attorney had advised him to say as little as possible, and he was trying, but the silence kept pulling at him. He said he had followed company policy. He said the decisions had been approved at the ownership level. He said he was being made a scapegoat for a system he hadn't designed. His attorney touched his arm to stop him there. Marcus sat back. He was quiet for a moment, a different kind of quiet than before. He looked down at his hands on the table. They were still. He looked at them for a long time, the way you look at something that belongs to you, but has just done something you didn't fully authorize. He didn't say anything else. He didn't need to. That look, that 4-second pause with his eyes on his own hands, was the most honest thing Marcus Holt said in any interview that week. The camera caught it. The clip circulated. Gerald Whitmore saw it and understood and released his attorney to begin settlement discussions the following morning. On Wednesday morning, Callaway and Marsh filed in Multnomah County Circuit Court, naming Gerald Whitmore personally and Whitmore's Kitchen LLC. The filing alleged wage theft totaling an estimated $214,000 across 14 plaintiffs over 31 months. The Oregon Bureau of Labor and Industries announced a formal compliance investigation to all 4 Portland locations that same afternoon. By Thursday, Cascade Bridge Capital, a real estate investment group that had been in late-stage negotiations with Whitmore on a $7 million mixed-use development in southeast Portland, had withdrawn from the agreement. The letter cited reputational and regulatory concerns. Gerald Whitmore's attorney described it privately as the most expensive 2-paragraph letter he had ever had to explain to a client. Gerald's second public statement appeared Friday. It was longer than the first. It named Marcus Holt 7 times. It expressed, in language that had clearly been written by someone who understood litigation, the company's deep regret for employees impacted by scheduling decisions made without appropriate oversight. It did not read like a man who believed he had done nothing wrong. It read like a man who had received a very clear accounting of what the next 12 months would cost him and had made his adjustments accordingly. But here's what mattered more than the statement. On the Friday afternoon that Gerald released it, Sarah Waverly received a tip, an anonymous one, a former Whitmore's Kitchen employee who had heard that the new reveal about Chris Hemsworth's involvement behind the scenes was being confirmed by Diane Marr's office. Sarah had asked Diane, did Chris Hemsworth have any role in facilitating the investigation? Diane's response was 3 words, he made a call. Sarah ran that as a sidebar, 8 paragraphs. She didn't have all of it. She didn't know exactly what was said or to whom, but she had enough. She had the sequence. The Friday morning when Diane was asked to check on the status of the investigation. The Friday afternoon when Gerald Whitmore, apparently rattled by something he'd learned that morning, suddenly retained an attorney and issued a preemptive statement. And the timing that suggested someone had made a call that changed the calculation. That sidebar ran on a Thursday. By the weekend, it had been picked up by 14 outlets. Gerald Whitmore called his attorney on Saturday morning at 7:45. He said, "Tell me what settlement looks like." His attorney told him. He said, "Do it." The class action settled 4 months later. 14 plaintiffs received a combined $196,000 in back wages and damages. Raymond Briggs's individual recovery was $8,300. He was back to work before the settlement finalized. A mid-size construction outfit in Beaverton had been looking for someone with 31 years of field experience to help manage project timelines from the coordination side. The work that uses what the years have deposited in your head rather than what they've taken from your knees. 3 days a week. The foreman, Bill Sauer, 44, had watched the video 9 times before he called. He spent about 4 minutes explaining the position and then said, "I just wanted to talk to the man who warranted that kind of staying." Tina Reeves returned to Whitmore's Kitchen the following spring. After Gerald sold 3 of the 4 locations to a hospitality group called Meridian Table Group, and a new operations director named Andrea Cole came in and started showing up at the kitchens unannounced. Tina came back as day shift lead. The pay was $3, $40 an hour more. She did not consider that a coincidence. Gordon Price didn't go back. He was working 2 jobs he preferred, and he'd said what he had to say, and that was enough. But here's something that happened before any of that. Something that very few people know about, because it happened inside Whitmore's Kitchen on a Thursday afternoon, about 10 days after the article published. And it wasn't filmed, and no one reported on it, and it only exists now because Tina Reeves mentioned it to Sarah Waverly in passing, and Sarah put it in her notes. Marcus Holt had gone back to collect the last of his personal items from his locker. It was 4 in the afternoon. Between shifts, the kitchen mostly quiet. Tina was at the prep station when she heard the back door. She stayed where she was. She could hear him in the locker room, the sound of a bag being packed, a lock being opened, the specific sounds of a person removing themselves from a place. He came through the kitchen on his way out. He stopped when he saw Tina. He stood in the doorway for a moment with his bag over his shoulder. He looked at the prep station, at the double doors to the dining room, at the schedule board on the wall where names were written in dry erase marker. Names that were actually there. Hours that would actually be paid. "I thought I was protecting the business," he said, not loudly. Just said it. The way you say something you've been going over for days and have finally arrived at the actual sentence. Tina set down her knife. She looked at him. "Raymond had a heart attack walking home," she said. Marcus nodded. He looked at the schedule board one more time. Then he walked out. Tina stood in the quiet kitchen for a moment after the door closed. She thought about the 2 years she had stayed silent. She thought about the cost of silence when it is accumulated, the way it compounds. The way staying quiet in order to protect yourself eventually becomes a way of protecting something that should not be protected. She picked up her knife and went back to work. Now, before we go back further to the morning in Australia that made Chris into the man who stopped in that parking lot, you need to understand what he was thinking about in those Pac North meetings. Not the meetings. What was running underneath them? He was thinking about a morning in the Northern Territory in the autumn of 2001. He was 17 and working a station job out of Bowman, cattle country, red dust roads, the kind of silence that has actual physical weight to it. A stockman named Warren, somewhere in his early 50s, leather-faced and economical with everything including words, had collapsed in the yards before first light. Just dropped. By the time anyone found him, it had been close to 20 minutes, maybe more. Heat and exertion and a heart that had been accumulating damage for years without making much noise about it. Chris had been the one to find him. He'd run a kilometer to the homestead for help. He'd sat with Warren in the dirt and held his hand and talked. Just talked. Whatever came out. Because he'd read somewhere once that hearing is the last thing a person loses. And he didn't know if that was true, but he wasn't willing to let Warren lie in silence. Warren survived. The Royal Flying Doctor Service flew him out. Darwin Hospital for 3 weeks, sent home with a list of things he could no longer do. Chris visited him once at his daughter's place in Catherine. Warren had shaken his hand very firmly and said nothing, which was, Chris had learned by then, exactly what Warren meant. The 2-finger pulse check, the nail beds, the aspirin before the ambulance, that came from a first aid course he'd done the year after Bowman because he'd stood in those yards not knowing what to do and decided he would never stand that way again. The calm came from something older. The Outback teaches a particular relationship with emergency. Things go wrong out there without warning, without an audience, without anyone arriving to manage it for you. You either handle it or it doesn't get handled. That practicality had settled into him somewhere in his late teens and never fully left. He still had a faint scar on his left forearm from a fencing wire incident at Bowman in 2001. Most people never noticed it. He didn't talk about it. But sometimes he touched it, the way you touch something you want to remember. Raymond kept the note in the shoebox. 3 sentences on hotel stationery, signed just Chris. I heard you're doing better. That's good. Take the 6 weeks. He kept it alongside the pay stubs and the scheduling texts because it was evidence of something. Not the legal kind, the other kind. He watched the clips sometimes, not often. 11 minutes and 43 seconds of a man doing the thing that most people drive past. And he had a theory he shared with anyone who'd listen. The theory was this: the reason that footage moved 11 million people was not because a famous person turned out to be kind. It was because you couldn't tell it was a famous person. You just saw a man stop, drop to one knee, put his hand on a stranger's shoulder, stay. That's the part Raymond always said. The staying. Anyone can stop. Stopping takes 30 seconds and costs nothing and can look, from the right angle, like help. But staying, sitting down on cold, wet pavement and deciding to be present for something that is not yours, with no audience, no, except that the person in front of you matters. That's a different kind of decision. It requires a particular quality of attention to other people that is, in this world, rarer than it should be. The security camera at the Morrison Fuel & Go recorded 11 minutes and 43 seconds. 11 million people watched a man they could not identify stay with a stranger until the sirens came. Most of them wrote, in different words, the same thing. They wrote, I want to be the kind of person who doesn't walk past. Here is what Whitmore's Kitchen, Marcus Holt and Gerald Whitmore teach us about what it costs when institutions treat people as inventory. And here is what Raymond Briggs, Danny Kowalski, Tina Reeves, and one man in a gray hoodie teach us about what restores them. Not grand speeches, not viral campaigns. One person at a time, deciding that the person in front of them is worth the cold, worth the wet, worth the time. That is not a complicated decision. It is a deliberate one. And the world changes, one deliberate decision at a time. Before you go, drop a comment and tell us where you're watching this from. Doesn't matter if it's a city you've lived in your whole life or somewhere you arrived by accident. And tell us this: has someone ever sat down on the wet pavement for you? Has someone stayed when they had every reason to keep walking? Those moments deserve to be spoken out loud. Share this video with that person if you can reach them. Subscribe if you believe that this kind of quiet, unhurried courage is worth more than we usually give it credit for. We'll see you in the next one. This is a fictional dramatized story created for educational and inspirational purposes. All supporting characters, businesses, and events are fictional. Any resemblance to real persons other than Chris Hemsworth is coincidental. Narration is AI assisted.